June the 8th, 1982, an Argentine First Lieutenant Hector Pipi Sanchez is flying an A4 Skyhawk attack jet just meters above East Falkland Island. He and 3 other aircraft of Meso Flight are on a mission to hit British ships unloading troops at Bluff Cove. Their low altitude is keeping them invisible to British radar and fighter jets. Sanchez works hard to keep his aircraft from hitting the ground. The Skyhawks pop up over a rise, and Sanchez's front windshield suddenly lights up with a wall of tracer fire flying directly towards them from the gathering dusk. The British have prepared quickly and have already set up their anti-aircraft guns in the hills. Sanchez pulls on his control stick, jinking his Skyhawk from left to right. Bullets whiz past him, streaking by his canopy. He keeps scanning the sky, hoping that he can avoid colliding with the 3 other pilots in his flight, or with the ground. Then flipping open the cage on his control stick, he squeezes the trigger and fires 20mm cannons, trying desperately to suppress the incoming fire. He keeps rolling, flying so low that British infantrymen throw themselves to the ground to avoid his jet wash. It's then he hears a sickening noise as bullets thump into his aircraft. He wants to shout out that he's hit, but the Skyhawks are on strict radio silence. The 3 other Skyhawks surge ahead as he struggles to stay in control of this airplane. Then the gunfire falls away as the 4 planes exit the range of the British guns and burst out over the cliffs to the sea. Sanchez tests his controls. Everything seems fine. He breathes a heavy sigh of relief. And then he looks up to see 3 other Skyhawks pulling away from him. They've reached the final waypoint and have increased power to begin their attack run towards Bluff Cove. Sanchez scrambles to catch up and throws his aircraft into a turn as his friends are already diving down to wave-top height. To his right, he can see the burning wrecks of the British landing ships Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram, which Argentine strike aircraft destroyed earlier in the day. Then he hears his flight leader calling out over the radio. It's First Lieutenant Danilo Bolzan, and he spotted something. The small Royal Marine landing craft is nowhere near the size of Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram, but it still carries valuable vehicles and commandos. Sanchez reaches down to his control panel and arms the fuses on his 3 500-pound bombs. He stares through the gun sight and readies himself to attack. Everything is led up to this moment. High above, Royal Navy pilot David Morgan and his wingman David Smith are flying a combat air patrol in their Sea Harriers. As he flies, Morgan keeps watch on the Royal Marine landing craft. He scans the waters below and suddenly spots the Skyhawks. He counts 3 small triangles of brown and green camouflage zipping across the waves.
A4's attacking the boat. Follow me down.
Morgan rolls his aircraft over, diving down inverted. Next to him, Smith rolls his aircraft over and follows. Far ahead, and still thousands of feet below them, the lead pair of Skyhawks are almost on top of the landing craft. Morgan's Harrier is armed with new and improved AIM-9L sidewinders, but the Skyhawks are too far away for the short-range missiles. At the front of the Argentinians, First Lieutenant Bolzan lines up his target in the gun sight. He opens up with his 20mm cannon, blasting the landing craft with a stream of rounds. Then he sets his bomb release to ripple, priming all 3 of his bombs to drop with one press of the release button. But only one bomb falls, whistling through the air and splashing down about 100 feet behind the stern of the landing craft. Bolzan pulls away, cursing his bad luck, while right behind him comes his number 2, Lieutenant Juan Araras. This time, there's no malfunction. 3 bombs come arcing down through the air, smashing into the landing craft as Araras peels away and roars from the target. Only one of the Argentinian bombs detonates, but that's more than enough for the small boat. The enormous blast obliterates the stern of the landing craft in a gigantic orange fireball. Sanchez is still very far behind his friends, and while he's celebrating, he doesn't even see the 2 dark grey Sea Harriers as they dive down and slot in behind the other Skyhawks. The Argentinian pilots have no idea they're being chased. From his cockpit, Morgan watches in horror and fury as the landing craft burns. An all-consuming rage boils up inside him, and he vows to kill the enemy airmen. Morgan lines up the leftmost Skyhawk in his gun sight. He flicks a switch with his thumb to select his sidewinder, and the missile's infrared seeker head instantly sniffs out the heat of the Skyhawk's engine. A bright green diamond pops up on the HUD and encloses the Skyhawk while the missile's growling tone changes pitch to indicate a solid lock.
Fox 2.
Igniting with a brilliant roar, the Sidewinder's white-hot rocket motor propels the missile off the launching rail and quickly accelerates to over twice the speed of sound. To the rear, Sanchez spots the bright flash of the missile launch. In seconds, the joy of a successful mission is replaced by blood-curdling fear. His warning is too late. The Sidewinder homes in on Ensign Alfredo Vasquez's engine and detonates into a cloud of burning fragments. Sanchez is horrified as he sees his friend's Skyhawk scattering across the waves in 1,000 pieces. He pushes his throttle forward and lines up Morgan's Harrier in his gun sight. He has a perfect shot. He squeezes the trigger to let loose his 20mm cannon, but there's nothing. He tries again, still no response from the gun. His heart sinks as Sanchez realizes that the British anti-aircraft guns must have knocked out his own cannon. There's nothing he can do but shout out another warning. Morgan's still streaking forward. He spots Lieutenant Juan Araras jinking to the left in response to Sanchez's warning. But Morgan still gets a lock. He presses down on the button and lets loose his second Sidewinder. Araras sees the incoming missile trail and quickly reverses his turn to the right, trying to break the missile lock. But the Sidewinder's seeker head easily maintains the lock, and the missile pulls sharply to the right and impacts just behind the cockpit. The Skyhawk breaks in two, the rear section shattering into 100 bits of wreckage as the cockpit nose and wings tumble down into the sea. Sanchez watches helplessly as another of his friend's aircraft is torn to pieces. Then he sees the bright white shape of a parachute inflating high above the water. Araras has managed to eject. His friend is alive. In the Sea Harrier, Morgan rolls sharply to avoid colliding as the chute comes falling down towards the ocean in front of him. Despite the anger that courses through his veins, he feels a sense of relief that the Argentinian pilot has escaped. But there's no mercy for those still in the fight. Morgan can see the Argentinian flight leader, Danilo Bolzan, dashing away across the water as fast as he can. The British pilot has used both of his Sidewinders, so he flicks the selector switch to activate his guns. Morgan lines up the fleeing Skyhawk, chasing it all the while, the gun reticle in his HUD automatically calculating the lead. But just as he prepares to fire, the HUD disappears, leaving nothing but an empty windscreen in front of him.
Bugger, not now.
It's a well-known glitch with the software of the Harrier. Morgan could fix it by rebooting, but that would take at least 10 seconds. Bolzan suddenly brakes hard towards him. Morgan pushes the blurred outline of the Skyhawk down to the bottom of the windscreen, trying to use the canopy bow as some kind of reference point. On gut feel, he times the release and squeezes the trigger as the air erupts with the thunder of the twin 30mm Aiden cannons.
Guns, guns, guns!
Shells rip across the sky as Morgan pulls his nose up, trying to walk the stream of fire onto the target. But it's no use. At 50 feet above sea level in the gathering dark, Morgan might as well be throwing the rounds himself. He keeps on squeezing the trigger, hoping that something will hit home. Then, there's silence. He's used up every last round. There's no more he can do now except pull back on the stick and hand over the fight to his wingman.
He's all yours, old chap.
In his cockpit, David Smith is already switching to Sidewinders.
Roger that, Red Leader.
Smith pushes the nose down and surges forward. The Skyhawk is back over the land now, heading southwest across the peninsula towards the ocean and the safety of Argentina. Smith pushes forward the throttle and pulls the enemy fighter into his HUD. The seeker head locks instantly, and Smith steadies the jet, his thumb poised on the red button.
Fox 2.
The missile blasts off the rail and streaks low towards the target. Bolzan's Skyhawk brakes hard, but the Sidewinder follows effortlessly, anticipating the enemy's flight and honing in on the aircraft. Sanchez watches with a feeling of total despair as the missile detonates just behind the jet, sending the Skyhawk jerking violently and trailing grey smoke. The remains go crashing down into the earth and throw up a giant explosion. This time, there's no chute. Sanchez is all alone, still trailing the two Sea Harriers. He watches as the British planes pull up alongside each other and reduce their speed. If only he had his guns, he could take them both out, but instead, he's completely powerless. If the Harriers come back around, he's doomed. The open ocean doesn't give him any space to hide. Then he spots it. The weather's closing in and a dark wall of rain stretches across the coast, swallowing the hills beyond over East Falkland. He turns course towards the island and punches the throttle. Then he reaches down and hits the button to jettison his remaining bombs and external fuel tanks. His Skyhawk surges forward. Flying into the rainstorm is dangerous, especially when he's just 50 feet off the ground with almost zero visibility in the dark of the evening. But Sanchez holds his course, pushing forward into the downpour. Up above, Morgan fiddles with his radar, trying to see if he can pick up any remaining contacts. But the Harrier's Blue Fox system is notoriously bad at tracking low-flying targets.
Come on!
All he gets are smudges of interference. He searches the skies and the wavetops for any sign of the Argentinian planes, but he doesn't see Sanchez as he disappears into the clouds.
I don't see anything else out there, boss.
Copy that. I'm bingo fuel anyway.
The two Harriers turn for home with just enough fuel to get them back to their carrier, HMS Hermes. Sanchez is buffeted by the wind, the heavy rain streaking across his windshield. Visibility is just 200 meters, and he flies on instruments and scraps of vision. All the while, he's preparing himself for the chase and checking all the time, but nothing follows him. No Harriers and no missiles. He heads southwest until the clouds finally break. It's here he can ease back on the throttle, taking his engine down from full power. Looking at his instrument panel, he sees he has just 500 pounds of fuel remaining. It's nowhere near enough to get him home to Argentina. He needs to buy some time. Thinking quickly, he climbs up to 30,000 feet. His engine will use less fuel in the thinner air. He's only got one chance. The Argentinian Air Force have a fleet of tankers, but none of them will come this close to enemy territory. Still, he has to try. He switches on his radio and calls out across the airwaves.
Condor 1, aquí Mazo 3, combustible bajo, solicito vectores para reabastecimiento.
Then, over the radio comes a response.
Mirea rumbo 270, nos vas a tener a la vista.
Sanchez pushes his Skyhawk on, scanning the empty skies. Just as his needle is dropping towards the red, he sees it. In the distance, a heavy 4-engined KC-130 Hercules tanker starts to emerge from the gloom. Relief washes over him, but it's quickly replaced by a new problem. The Hercules is flying far below him, down in the thicker air. If he descends now, he'll burn through his remaining fuel before they can even start refueling. He switches on the radio, trying to keep his voice steady.
Estás muy bajo, no puedo descender. Entendido, subimos a su nivel.
Sanchez knows the risks the crew are taking. The higher they fly, the more chance they'll be spotted by the British. As the aircraft eases up towards his level, Sanchez eases his Skyhawk into position, inching closer to the trailing hose. The drogue basket sways around in the slipstream. His fuel gauge is already showing empty. There's no margin for error. He nudges the throttle forward and flicks his stick left and right. The Skyhawk's refueling probe extends from the nose, and he carefully lines it up with the basket. He pushes forward and the probe slots into the drogue with a sharp jolt.
Contacto, transfiriendo combustible.
Sanchez looks down at his instruments. His fuel needle still isn't moving. He taps the glass with his finger, willing it to rise, but there's still nothing.
Está perdiendo combustible. Repito, está perdiendo combustible.
Sanchez twists his head to the right and looks back along his wing. A thin white stream trails behind him as fuel vapor leaks from his plane and condenses in the cold air. The British guns must have torn through the tanks. For a moment, neither side says anything. There's no point wasting fuel on an aircraft that can't hold it. Sanchez waits for the order to disconnect. Instead, the tanker pilot makes a life-saving decision.
Manténgase acoplado, lo llevamos a casa.
Sanchez's eyes widen in disbelief. The Hercules brings a slow, deliberate turn back towards Argentina, dragging the crippled Skyhawk along behind it. Gradually, the Argentinian coastline comes into view. It's only when the runway at Rio Gallegos appears that the tanker finally gives the order.
Prepárese para el desacople.
Sanchez steadies his jet. The probe slips out and the Skyhawk is free, but still dangerously low on fuel. There's no time to waste. He lowers the nose and begins his descent, lining up with the runway. His engine already sputters as he brings the power back, the last drops of fuel feeding into the system. The ground rushes up towards him. He's too fast and too high. Sanchez pulls her nose up, flaring the plane and bleeding off speed. The Skyhawk shakes as gravity pulls it down to earth. Then the wheels slam onto the runway. The plane bounces once, twice, then settles, rolling along the tarmac as Sanchez pulls back on the throttle and brings it to a stop. He looks up. The ground crew is already running towards him. Sanchez switches off his engine and raises his canopy. Pulling off his helmet and throwing it to the ground, his anger and frustration finally break through the shock. All three of his friends are shot down. 2 of them are dead. His only hope is that Juan Araras will be picked up after his ejection. In the end, Sanchez was the only survivor of Meso flight. Alfredo Vasquez and Danilo Bolzan were killed instantly by the missiles, while Juan Araras managed to eject, but was killed by the force of ejection. Years after the war, Sanchez was united with David Morgan. The 2 former enemies became firm friends after spending hours drinking cider and recreating the dogfight. As Sanchez put it, "Don't worry, David, we were just doing our jobs."
Click here to watch our Modern Battles compilation for more incredible stories like this.